Imagine waking up on January 1st, 1950. The Second World War has been over for nearly 5 years. The boys have come home. The factories that once built tanks and bombers are now turning out refrigerators and station wagons. And somewhere deep in the American soul, there's a feeling that has no perfect word for it. Something between relief and hunger. Relief that the darkness of the war years has passed. And hunger for something better, something new, something American.
The United States of America in 1950 is a nation of 151 million people. It's the richest, most powerful country on earth. It has just won a world war. Its factories hum, its economy booms, and its people, its remarkable, restless, contradictory people, are building a new version of the American dream, one cinder block and one car payment at a time. But beneath the optimism, the barbecues, and the brand new television sets, the fault lines are already forming. Cold War shadows stretch over every rooftop. Racial injustice simmers beneath a polished surface, and a small, distant conflict called Korea is about to change everything.
To understand America in 1950, you have to understand what money felt like after years of depression and war rationing. For 2 decades, Americans had gone without jobs, without butter, without new shoes, without hope. And now, suddenly, the shelves were full.
The American economy in 1950 was, by almost any measure, extraordinary. Gross domestic product had more than doubled since the end of the war. Unemployment sat below 5%, wages were rising, and American factories, untouched by the bombs that had flattened Europe and Japan, were producing nearly half of the world's manufactured goods. Detroit, Michigan was the symbol of this prosperity. In 1950, American automakers produced nearly 8 million vehicles, a record. General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler were the biggest corporations in the world. And owning a car wasn't just transportation, it was identity, it was freedom, it was proof that you had arrived.
But not everyone shared in the boom. The GI Bill, the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, had put millions of veterans through college, and now those college-educated men were entering the workforce, taking white-collar jobs, buying homes in the suburbs, and fueling a consumer revolution. Credit was becoming normal. Installment plans made washing machines and furniture accessible to families who had never imagined owning them outright. But not everyone shared in the boom. For Black Americans, for many immigrants, for working-class families in rural areas, the prosperity of 1950 was something seen through a window, close enough to want, but not always close enough to touch. We will return to that story, but first, let's look at where Americans were living.
William Levitt had been building homes since before the war, but in 1950, his name was synonymous with a new American phenomenon, the suburb. Levittown, New York, built on a former potato field on Long Island, was already home to 70,000 people. Levitt had pioneered assembly line construction, building a new house every 16 minutes at peak production. Each home was small, about 750 square feet, but it had a kitchen, a living room, 2 bedrooms, and a small yard, and it cost less than $8,000. For a generation that had grown up in tenement apartments or crowded Depression-era homes, this was extraordinary. Having your own house with a yard and a garage and a kitchen with modern appliances was the American dream made concrete, and millions of families were living it. By 1950, the suburbs were growing at 3 times the rate of cities. The car made it possible. If you could drive 30 minutes to work, you didn't need to live in the city center. And the new highways being built across America made that drive shorter every year.
Let's step inside an ordinary American home in 1950. It is a Tuesday morning in September, let's say in Columbus, Ohio. The house is modest, a 3-bedroom colonial on a quiet street. There is a Chevrolet in the driveway, a vegetable garden out back. The mother of this household, let's call her Dorothy, is up at 6. She starts the percolator, makes oatmeal on the gas stove, and packs her husband Robert's lunch, a bologna sandwich, an apple, a thermos of coffee. Robert works at the Westinghouse plant. He is on the day shift, 7 to 3:30. Their children, a boy of 9 and a girl of 7, eat breakfast in their school clothes, listening to the morning radio show. There is no television in most American homes yet. In 1950, only about 9% of households own a TV set, but that is changing fast. By the end of the decade, nearly 90% will have one. American food in 1950 reflected both abundance and a love of convenience. The canned food industry had boomed during the war, when preservable food was essential, and the habit had stuck. Canned vegetables, Campbell's tomato soup, Spam, these were fixtures of the American pantry. Frozen food was new and exciting. Swanson's TV dinners wouldn't arrive until 1954, but frozen vegetables and orange juice concentrate were already changing how families cooked. Supermarkets, a relatively new invention, were replacing corner grocery stores. Piggly Wiggly, A&P, and Safeway had stores across the country. Shopping had become a weekly expedition, not a daily errand. And the refrigerator, that gleaming, humming symbol of modernity, meant food could be stored for days. Sunday dinner was sacred. For most American families, it was the meal of the week. A roast chicken or pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans from a can, pie from scratch. The family gathered. Grace was said. And for a few hours, the world outside the dining room didn't exist. If you wanted to go out in 1950, you had options. The movies were still the great American escape. Nearly 90 million tickets were sold every week. Hollywood was in its golden age. All About Eve, Sunset Boulevard, and Cinderella all came out in 1950. A ticket cost about 50 cents. A bag of popcorn was a dime. Drive-in theaters were booming. There were over 4,000 across the country, and more opening every year. You drove in, hung the speaker on your window, and watched the movie from the front seat of your car. For teenagers, the drive-in was more than a movie theater. It was a social institution. Baseball was still the undisputed national pastime. The New York Yankees, led by Joe DiMaggio, were the greatest team in the sport. On summer evenings, radios across America crackled with the play-by-play. Boys collected baseball cards. Men argued statistics at the barbershop. Save a slight sense of anticipation for television. The viewer should feel that something big is just around the corner. And then there was television. Though still a luxury in 1950, TV was clearly the future. Milton Berle's Texaco Star Theater was packing audiences into bars and neighbors' living rooms every Tuesday night. Ed Sullivan's show had just started, and a young comedian named Lucille Ball was about to change everything. Save a slight sense of anticipation for television. The viewer should feel that something big is just around the corner. The story of America in 1950 cannot be told honestly without confronting a painful truth. The country's prosperity was built on a foundation of profound and systematic racial inequality. For Black Americans, Native Americans, Hispanic Americans, and other communities of color, the American dream of 1950 was frequently a dream denied. Segregation was not merely a Southern phenomenon, though it was most codified and brutal there. In states across the South, the Jim Crow laws enforced separation at every level of daily life: schools, restaurants, buses, hotels, drinking fountains, even hospitals.
A black American in Mississippi in 1950 could be arrested for drinking from the wrong fountain, for looking a white person in the eye, for simply existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. The Great Migration, the movement of black Americans from the rural South to northern and Midwestern cities, had been underway for decades, driven by both the hope of economic opportunity and the desperate need to escape Southern terror. By 1950, cities like Chicago, Detroit, New York, and Philadelphia had large, vibrant black communities. But the North was no paradise. Redlining, the systematic denial of mortgages and loans to black families in certain neighborhoods, kept black Americans confined to overcrowded urban areas, locked out of the suburban prosperity their white neighbors were enjoying.
But 1950 was not a time of silence, it was a time of gathering thunder. President Truman had ordered the desegregation of the armed forces in 1948, a landmark decision. And in courtrooms across the country, NAACP lawyers led by Thurgood Marshall were methodically dismantling the legal architecture of segregation, case by case. In 1950, the Supreme Court ruled in Sweatt v. Painter and McLaurin v. Oklahoma State Regents, two decisions that chipped away at separate but equal in graduate education. These were the building blocks of what would come 4 years later, Brown v. Board of Education. The black church was the organizational backbone of the resistance, a space of safety, community, and power. Ministers preached dignity and courage from their pulpits. Women organized, young people prepared. A movement was being born, though it had not yet found the name the world would come to know it by. For many black veterans returning from World War II, the contradiction was maddening and radicalizing. They had fought for democracy abroad, in uniform, under fire, with courage and sacrifice. They had helped defeat fascism, and they came home to a country that still forced them to sit at the back of the bus. That would not stand, not forever. And 1950 was the quiet before the storm that would finally force America to reckon with itself. Beneath the gleaming surface of 1950's prosperity, there was fear. Not the immediate, tangible fear of the war years, but something more insidious, a fear that couldn't be seen or touched, a fear of the bomb, a fear of communism, a fear that the enemy had already infiltrated the American way of life. The Soviet Union had detonated its first atomic bomb in August 1949. The news had stunned America. The United States had believed it had years, perhaps decades, before the Soviets could develop a nuclear weapon. Suddenly, the unthinkable was real. And in 1950, the arms race was underway. In American schools, children practiced duck and cover drills, crouching under their wooden desks, covering the backs of their necks with their hands. It was theater, of course. No school desk could survive a nuclear blast. But the drills served a psychological purpose. They told children and their parents that the government had a plan, that there was something you could do. In February 1950, a junior senator from Wisconsin named Joseph McCarthy stood up at a Republican dinner in Wheeling, West Virginia, and claimed to hold in his hand a list of known communists employed by the United States State Department. He had no such list, but the claim ignited a firestorm. McCarthyism, the practice of making sweeping, often baseless accusations of communist sympathy, would come to define the early 1950s. Hollywood screenwriters were blacklisted, professors were fired, government employees were investigated. People lost their jobs, their reputations, their friendships over rumors and suspicions. The atmosphere was one of fear and conformity, Say the wrong thing, know the wrong person, sign the wrong petition, and your life could be destroyed. The House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, had been investigating alleged communist influence in American life since the 1940s. In 1950, its reach extended into every corner of American culture. Fear was not irrational. There were Soviet spies operating in America. The Rosenberg spy case would come to trial in 1951, but the response went far beyond reasonable caution. It became a witch hunt.
The fear of communism reshaped American life in ways both visible and invisible. It accelerated conformity. Standing out, being different, questioning authority was dangerous. It reinforced a particular image of the ideal American: white, middle class, Christian, patriotic, suburban. Those who didn't fit that image faced suspicion.
On June 25, 1950, at 4 in the morning, North Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel and invaded South Korea. The peace, such as it was shattered. President Harry S. Truman made the decision to intervene within days. Under the banner of the United Nations, though the force was overwhelmingly American, U.S. troops were dispatched to the Korean peninsula. They arrived ill-equipped and undertrained, shocked by the ferocity of the North Korean advance. The early months of the war were desperate. American and South Korean forces were pushed to the southern tip of the peninsula, the Pusan perimeter, barely holding on. Then, in September, General Douglas MacArthur executed one of the most audacious military maneuvers of the 20th century, the amphibious landing at Incheon, deep behind enemy lines. It turned the war around overnight. American forces raced north, approaching the Chinese border, and then, in late November 1950, hundreds of thousands of Chinese troops poured across the Yalu River. It was another catastrophic reversal. American forces retreated in brutal winter conditions. The Chosin Reservoir campaign would become one of the most harrowing episodes in American military history. Back home, the mood shifted. This was not the triumphant war of 1945. There were no ticker-tape parades on the horizon. Korea was messy and cold and confusing. Why were we there? Who were we fighting for? When would it end? The Korean War would grind on for 3 more years, eventually killing more than 36,000 Americans, and it would end not in victory, but in a stalemate, an armistice, a line drawn, roughly where it had begun. But in 1950, those years of attrition lay ahead. What Americans knew in 1950 was that their sons were dying again in a distant land for reasons that felt, at the very best of times, complicated.
Culture is where the human spirit breathes, even in anxious times. Great historical forces play out against the backdrop of ordinary human creativity. And in 1950, American art, music, and literature were alive with energy, sometimes reflecting the era's optimism, sometimes quietly challenging it. Music. Swing and big band music, which had dominated the 1940s, was fading, and in its place, something new was stirring. Rhythm and blues, born in the black musical tradition, was beginning to cross over into white audiences, carried on the airwaves of independent radio stations that dared to play it. Fats Domino had just released his first records. Sister Rosetta Tharpe was electrifying audiences. Hank Williams dominated country radio. And a teenager named Elvis Presley was 14 years old, living in Memphis, Tennessee, listening to everything he could find: gospel, R&B, country, absorbing it all, preparing, without knowing it, to change the world. That explosion was still 4 years away, but the ingredients were already in place. American literature in 1950 was in a reflective, searching mood.
The war had left writers grappling with questions of mortality, identity, and purpose. Norman Mailer's The Naked and the Dead had been published in 1948. In 1950, Ernest Hemingway published Across the River and Into the Trees, not his best work, but the product of a mind still churning with the residue of war. More electric was what was happening on the margins. The beats, Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, William Burroughs, were writing in coffee houses and tiny apartments, creating a counter-narrative to the suburban dream. Their America was restless, searching, and deeply uncomfortable with conformity. Their work wouldn't reach mass audiences until later in the decade. Kerouac's On the Road wouldn't be published until 1957, but the seeds were planted in 1950. Art and architecture. Abstract expressionism, the movement centered in New York, was making American art the envy of the world for the first time. Jackson Pollock, Willem de Kooning, and Mark Rothko were creating work unlike anything the art world had seen before. Pollock's drip paintings seemed to embody the psychological rawness of the post-war world, chaotic, powerful, impossible to ignore. In architecture, modernism was reshaping the American cityscape. Ludwig Mies van der Rohe was building in Chicago. Philip Johnson was experimenting. The clean lines and functional spaces of modernist design were influencing everything from downtown skyscrapers to suburban ranch houses.
As 1950 drew to a close, Americans could look back on a year of extraordinary contradictions, a year of abundance and anxiety, of conformity and creativity, of optimism and dread, of a democracy that had defeated fascism abroad while tolerating injustice at home.
For many Americans, it was exactly that. The 1950s, which began right here in this year, would be remembered as a golden age, an age of Ozzie and Harriet, of tail fins and sock hops, and the American dream at its most aspirational. And for many Americans, it was exactly that. But it was also a decade haunted by the possibility of nuclear annihilation, scarred by McCarthyism and paranoia, built on the excluded labor and excluded lives of millions of Americans who were told the dream was not for them.
What 1950 gave America was a choice it wouldn't fully face for years. The choice between the comfortable myth and the complex, difficult, necessary truth. Between the gleaming surface and the trembling foundations. The people who lived through 1950 were not simple. They were not merely nostalgic figures in a Norman Rockwell painting, though Rockwell painted them beautifully. They were human beings, brave and frightened, generous and selfish, full of hope and full of contradiction, just like every generation before and after them. And the questions they were grappling with in 1950, about freedom, about equality, about power and fear, and the kind of country America wanted to be, those questions did not end with the decade. They echoed forward. They are still echoing now. This was America in 1950. Thank you for watching.